Hello, I'm Sheryl McCarthy. Welcome to One to One. Ever since the federal government sold Governor's Island to New York City and state in 2003, proposals about what to do with the island have abounded. Should it function as an art and cultural hub, a center for scientific research, a public high school campus? Would there be room for commercial office towers, retail establishments, and luxury hotels? So far, the Trust for Governor's Island has held the line against developing the island for anything other than recreation, arts, and education purposes. Last year, it appointed Lauren Haynes, a longtime curator, as head curator and vice president of arts and culture. Her mission is to turn Governor's Island into New York's preeminent public art destination. She'll also tell us about the wide variety of activities that the island offers. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
So why don't you give me some of the history of Governor's Island?
Yeah, you know, Governor's Island is, I think, one of the most unique places that we have here in New York City. It has a long history. In the very beginnings, it was a hunting and fishing ground for the Lenape. And then the Dutch moved in, and then the British, and that's when it really became Governor's Island. And then after the American Revolution until the early 1960s, it was a U.S. military base. Then after the military moved out, the Coast Guard moved in, and they were there from the 1960s until 1996. And that's sort of when this conversation about what happens to Governor's Island started. And as you mentioned, in 2003, it became something that the city and the state took care of. And then in 2005, after the Trust for Governor's Island began, we opened for public access.
And I think it was just vacant for a good period of time, right?
It was.
As people engaged in this debate, because, you know, whenever there is some vacant land in New York City, you know, everybody has an idea about what should be built on it. Tell me about what physical structures are on the island now.
Yeah, you know, the island is still home to many of the structures that have been there really since the military and even pre the military, like thinking about some of the structures that they would have used to house the officers, to house the enlisted men and women, to really think about also the barracks, to think about, okay, you need to store the ammunition. So all of those buildings still exist on the island. Two spots on the island are under the purview of the National Park Service, so Castle Williams and Fort Jay, and those really date to that time when there was that military presence on the island.
Right, and they dated back to, I guess, the Continental Army,
right?
You know, and you know, way back then. The barracks. My husband was in the Coast Guard, and he stayed in the barracks. Are the barracks still there? Are those buildings still there?
You know, there are the buildings, to my knowledge, that yes, house the enlisted people that were on the island in the barracks, and all of them, I think, throughout history, once the military left, once the Coast Guard left, even during those times, all began to sort of have unique purposes at that time.
And then there are all of the houses, you know, that I guess the officers stayed in. And then, as I recall, and I haven't been there in probably about 15 years, and there's some smaller houses. There are lots of houses there.
Yes.
That can be used for different purposes. Now, I understand that some of the buildings were built by McKim, Mead and White. I didn't know. I didn't know that. You know specifically which buildings those are?
I do not know.
Okay, but that was a revelation to me. And we're talking about a total of 172 acres, right?
Yes, there are 172 acres that make up Governor's Island, and some of those, as I mentioned, really are under the Park Service purview, and then the rest, the trust, we care for and take care of.
Right. So before we talk about the art aspect of the island, let's talk about the recreational aspect of the island, because I think it's largely a place for people go to unwind, to rest, and see what beautiful things there are. I know that there are bicycle trails, right?
There is, you know, one of the things that, well, I love so many things about Governor's Island, but one of the things that I really love is the fact that there aren't a lot of cars. So the idea that the way you get around mostly is by walking, is by riding a bike. You can bring your own bike over on the ferry, you can rent bikes, there are city bikes available. So it really is a way that you can explore the island.
And I think that the last time I went, there wasn't a lot of food on the island.
Yeah.
I think there were a couple of vendors. I gather that has changed.
Yeah, you know, it's been really exciting as a New Yorker to think about over the last 20 years how Governor's Island has continued to develop and to grow. So yes, in the summers especially, we have so many amazing options for food from a variety of vendors, and really a place where you can bring your own food if you want to, or go to one of the vendors and then spread out on the island.
I read, I think, that there was a proposal for a social hub, an eatery, which I don't know, it just sort of sounded to me maybe like a food court kind of thing, indoor. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe what is that? Is that what they're talking about?
Yeah, you know, one of the exciting things that we think about with the buildings and the structures that we have on the island is how do we breathe new life into them? How do we breathe life into them with also things that we need? So something like an indoor year-round dining experience. So I think that's what you're talking about. So
Okay.
that's something that even recently we released an RFP, and so had proposals, and really we're thinking about what's the best way to grow that space and to think about our visitors, think about future visitors. And so that was something that in the next year or so will really start to come online and really continue to grow what we're able to do year round on the island.
Tell me about the public arts program.
Yeah. No.
I'll let you start.
I don't know. Go ahead. Tell me what you want to know first.
I gathered there are maybe a half dozen or so sort of permanent artwork structures. Tell me about, why don't you describe some of those to me?
Yeah, so really under my purview, this idea of Governor's Island Arts is really thinking about art across the island. So in addition to the public artworks that we have on the island, we also have a performance series called Interventions, and we also have an organizations and residence program that use some of those historic houses we were talking about. And with our public art that we have on the island, we have a handful of works that are really accessible to visitors all the time. And so we start with, even on before you even get on the ferry, there's a mural by the artist Duke Riley in our Battery Maritime building where you catch the ferry to Governor's Island. And that's sort of the first thing you see. And that's been really lovely to see how visitors interact with that, because it's a bit of a surprise when you're waiting.
Is it a painting?
It's a painting on the wall in the building, inside the ferry building.
Okay.
And then on the island, we have a range of works. We have a work by an artist named Rachel Whiteread called Cabin, and it's one of the first works that was permanently installed on the island, so it's been on view for close to a decade. And it's a work which, one of the things that I think we really think deeply about with the art on the island is how do you make it so that people can come across and not necessarily feel like it's competing with the nature and competing with the landscape. And so a work like Rachel's called Cabin, you really see it from different angles, and you have to walk up a hill, you have to walk up an incline to actually get closer to experience what the work is. We have a work by the artist Mark Dion, which is a work that really is installed in one of our buildings that we were talking about that had a previous life, and he's created an installation that is really meant to look like an abandoned field station of a marine biologist. And this idea that the marine biologist, just looking at all the data and everything that comes along with climate change, sort of just got so almost just fed up, melancholy in a way, that they just sort of abandoned their field station. So you sort of peek in and see the remnants of their work as well. We have this summer a great exhibition that I'm calling it great, but I curated it, so I feel comfortable with that, called Rest Play. And that really is a group show that looks at the way people spend time on the island. So again, this idea of rest, where you just come because you want to relax. It's a great open space. I think it's one of the few spaces in New York City where you can go and be alone, even if you are still with people. So there's some artist-designed seating by artists like Hank Willis Thomas and Arlene Sheckett.
And that is something, this is outside?
Yes.
Okay.
It's outside, spread across the island, because again, as people come to the island to do a variety of things, we want the art to really meet them where they are. So to be spread out in different locations, say if you're always coming and you love to go to the hammock grove. You're going to pass some art as you get on your way there. You love Nolan Park because you want to see what's happening in the houses. You love spending time with the organizations and residents. You'll see a work by two artists, Lenka Clayton and Philip Andrew Lewis, called A Sudden Gust of Wind, which is 101 aluminum kites installed across the island. And again, it's meant to this idea of you discover. So you see one in a tree and you're like, oh no, someone must have lost their kite. But then very quickly you sort of start to see more and more. And then hopefully you realize it's an art installation and you want to find out more. And this is something that will be up through May of 2026.
Did you say something about a hammock grove?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. So we, have some amazing locations on the island, including hammocks that are free of use. So first come, first serve. And there's a selection of them in one area where it's a grove of hammocks that's sort of nestled in to another one of my favorite parts of the island where you can sort of walk down a path and see these hammocks and just relax.
Tell me about the Summer in Residence program.
So every summer, we turn over use of the historic houses in Nolan Park to other arts nonprofits in New York City. And what we ask is for the use of this space, that on the weekends, they open the first floor galleries to our visitors. So everyone does a range of things. Some people have artists in residence who are working on very specific projects. Some do exhibitions, some do programming, some do a mix of all three throughout the summer. And it's really amazing because it so much changes the vibe of the island. It changes what the feeling is every summer, where you can come to Nolan Park on the weekend, go in and out of the houses, and really spend time getting to know the arts that exist here in New York City.
And the Performing Arts program.
Yes. So that is a program called Interventions, which is curated by my colleague, Juan Pablo Siles, who really thinks about what does it mean to have performing arts on an island where these performances are going to be outside, right? So we obviously have some indoor space we can use, but our focus really is the outside and the public open space. So it's fun to really have those conversations with artists, with performers, to think about, well, how does your work in this setting?
So what you'd have music, and I assume plays as well?
Music, dance, plays, really the range of what you think of when you think of the performing arts. We sort of like to keep our options open and respond and listen to artists.
And one thing about it, I mean, the Governor's Island used to be open just a few days a year, and now, I guess, how long it's been, now it's open 365 days of the year.
Yes, we're open every day.
Wow, wow. Do you think, I suspect a lot of New Yorkers are aware that there is a Governor's Island, but do you think that they are really aware of the variety of activities that are offered there, or if they know what's really on the island?
I think some New Yorkers are. We get about 1 million visitors a year, so we definitely have New Yorkers who know and sort of come and use all aspects, but then we have people who come just because there are a lot of races and 5Ks that happen on the island, so I think we get people
Oh,
that
really?
come specifically, yes, especially in the fall. There's a lot of running, people who wake up very early to come and run around the island.
Okay.
Yes, so I think that group knows about that. I think there are people that know that we have an amazing arts program, so they'll come for that. There are a variety of people that like to come and ride their bikes around, bring their families. So I think we have people that know, and then once you're there, you do discover all the other things that happen and how it can really be a constant year-round destination.
How did you become a curator?
Yeah, growing up, I always thought I was going to be a lawyer. And so when I went to college, I needed a work-study job, and I went to Oberlin College in Oberlin, Ohio. Oberlin has an amazing art museum called the Allen Memorial Art Museum, and I got a job working in the director's office for the director's executive assistant. I didn't know anything about art really going into that job. I just felt I could do whatever you let an 18-year-old do in an office. And I quickly fell in love with the behind-the-scenes aspect of museum work and the arts. And the woman who was the director of the museum at the time, an African-American woman named Sharon Patton. So what I saw in my first experience was someone who looked like me in charge. And so very quickly, I also started taking art history classes, fell in love with that, and then just did a lot of internships, summer jobs throughout my time in college, and really came to know I wanted to work in the arts. And that's really how that developed.
So what advice would you give to a young person who who wants to become a curator?
Yeah, you know, sometimes I say when I talk to young people, talk to students, I sort of say, if you can think of anything else you could do besides being a curator, maybe you should do that, because it is difficult, it's a lot of work, it's a very competitive field. But if there's nothing else you can think of doing, I think just take it all in, see as much art of all types that you can, even if you don't want to work with living artists, talk to artists, see things, develop your own opinions, develop your own ideas, and just really keep going and make sure you're developing a great community that can support you as you are doing this work.
Right. And internships, of course, which I recommend to
Oh, absolutely.
young people in any field.
Any
is,
field.
is how you get
Yeah.
it in. What drew you to Governor's Island? Now, you were at the Schomburg and you were at...
I was at the Studio Museum.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry out there, people. You were at the Studio Museum
Yes.
of Harlem.
I was at the Studio Museum in Harlem for about a decade, and then I left New York and was at Crystal Bridges in Bentonville, Arkansas, at the Nasher at Duke University, and then came back to New York and I worked at the Queens Museum for a little while. And really what drew me to Governor's Island was things that I had learned at every institution that I had been at, this idea of what it means to have a unique community, and what it means to think about the audience that comes to Governor's Island. So I was really drawn to this idea of what it means to reach all New Yorkers on 172 acres, and this idea of public art, and how there's often, with museums, even museums that are free, there's a barrier, right? I think people have a hard time thinking that maybe museums aren't for them, that they can't always come in the doors.
It's a mental barrier.
It's a mental barrier. And I think, frankly, sometimes there are museums that have actual barriers with cost or with how people are treated once they're inside the space. But at Governor's Island, once you are on the island is yours, right? And so what does it mean to have art and place art in that context? And that was really what was exciting to me about this position.
You've been there about, 18 months?
Yes.
What are some of your accomplishments in that time? What are some of the things you think you have achieved in that period of time?
Yeah, you know, I think the biggest thing is I now sort of know where everything is on the island, but really thinking about the arts and the projects that we have done. Last summer when I started, there was an amazing exhibition that was already scheduled, and I got to install an exhibition by the artist Jenny Kendler called Other of Pearl, and that was installed inside of Fort J. So that was in partnership with a few different organizations to really make that come to life. And then this summer, Rest Play, I think, is one of the great accomplishments that I'm really excited about, what it means to have a group show on the island as well. And then I think there are the things that people don't see, sort of the behind the scenes, like what it means to sort of come in and like get to know your colleagues, get to know your department, but really excited about the shows and the artists and the conversations that we've continued to have every year. We have coming up a really great ice sculpting competition that will take place in February. And that's something that we do every year. And so excited about that.
Where do the ice sculptors come from? Why are you...
So we accept proposals from artists all over the city. And then once your proposal is accepted, you get $2,000, and then you get matched with a professional ice carver who teaches you how to use all the tools. So you don't have to have ice carving experience. You don't even have to be a sculptor. You just have to sort of be open to learning the process. And then it's a live carving extravaganza that takes place. And then there's also music and food trucks and activities for everyone while this is happening.
Cool. I just want to mention some of the other things that are on Governor's Island. There's the New York Harbor School.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the New York Harbor School is a New York City public high school. So there are students from all 5 boroughs that come and spend their days learning in the Harbor School.
What does one learn in the Harbor School?
I think in addition to all the things that students learn in high school, they're also having a focus really thinking about marine life, the harbor, and what it means to really think through everything that's happening in the waterways. And so the students learn to fish, they learn to swim, they learn really what it means to be on the island and really in the harbor.
Yeah. An urban farm?
Yes, so there's urban farming. You know, we have amazing tenants and partners throughout the island. So there's an urban farm. We have a longtime tenant, the Billion Oyster Project, that also works with a lot of our other partners, including the Harbor School. It really is a unique ecosystem on the island of all of the people.
And one can go glamping.
Yes.
On the island, which is a term I only heard about recently.
Yes. One of our tenants, Collective Retreats, has an amazing glamping setup where that is really it's not something you can often do, right? Sort of wake up and see amazing views of the Statue of Liberty, of the East River, and that you can do that from their site on the island.
So these are really kind of fancy tents, or?
There's some tents, there's some small cabins, just a variety, I think, of different options for sort of choose your own adventure type
Well, the ones
things.
I saw, they're really, it's not like the sleeping in a sleeping bag the way I used to do.
No,
It's really a more glamorous,
Yes.
therefore the term glamping, a more glamorous
Exactly.
form of camping. And there's been talk for years about this $700 million research institution that's planned, which is, I gather, is a consortium of a number of universities where they're going to focus on climate issues. How far along is that? Have they started to build anything yet, or are they still being formed in people's minds?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that I love about the island is that there's often so many different things happening. And as my purview is really the arts, I think the climate campus that Stony Brook is really taking the lead on, there are various conversations that are happening as they're continuing to develop and move forward with that, which is really one of the things that I'm excited about, because as that comes online, we are starting to think about what it means to continue to increase access to the island at different times of the year, and what it means to really build that up. And it's really exciting to think about that moment in the future when this campus is open, when we have just a really different life cycle of what's happening than now.
As I mentioned before, whenever there is any vacant land within the city's boundaries, but particularly Manhattan, there are always developers who want to snatch it up, who want to build something like, a 60-story apartment building or a skyscraper for businesses. I was reading that now the mandate for Governor's Island at the time that it was turned over to the city was that it be used to, for the public good, for art, education, recreational kind of stuff, and specifically that they not be able to develop any housing on it. But I gather that under the de Blasio administration, partly at his urging, the city council approved a rezoning of a portion of the island to rezone it so that it could possibly accommodate 20-story office buildings, luxury hotels, office towers, biotech research facility, manufacturing, and high-end destination retail. Now, I gather that has been challenged in court. So I don't know where that stands legally now, but how do you feel about that kind of development coming to the island?
Yeah, all of that is a little bit out my purview. And what I think about, one of the things that I love is that arts and culture is one of the three pillars of the island, right? So as we're thinking about arts and culture, as we think about open space, as we think about climate solutions, and so really being able to think about how art connects and plays in with all of those things is something that I am excited to think about how that grows. So I think as the island evolves and shifts and changes, I'm pretty excited that I feel like arts and culture will always be a core pillar of what we do on the island.
I would suspect, though, that you would not be thrilled with the idea of any skyscrapers going up.
I mean, there are a lot of skyscrapers in New York City already, and the art on the island is a way in which we're able to sort of, I think, reach people who want to have a different feel and have a different visit and really think about what it means to be out in open space and out thinking about art, thinking about nature, thinking about climate solutions, and how art plays into all of that is really what we can do.
Yeah. Do you want to mention any particular performances that are coming up in the near future?
We had really our intervention really our intervention season is ended for the year.
Okay,
So as
okay.
we really start to look towards 2026, I just encourage everyone to keep an eye out on our website and for announcements as we really talk about what we're going to really be doing next year.
To our viewers who have never been to Governor's Island, or who, like me, haven't been in a long time,
Yeah.
why should they come?
I mean, I think everyone should come because there's nowhere like it. You can come if you just maybe need to take a walk, if you're feeling a little closed in, if you want to ride a bike, if you want to just actually explore and see art, if you want to count kites in trees, I think you can come. I sort of say that there's something on Governor's Island for everyone. And I also feel like you may come for a certain reason, to go glamping, to go to the spa, to ride a bike around, but then you'll come back because you discovered something else that you didn't know was there the first time. And so there's really this ability that Governor's Island has to make you want to come back time and time again. And especially if you haven't been in years, decades, come back because it's going to be a completely different experience than you first had.
Yeah, my feeling is that, one reason I wanted to do this show is because, like I said, I haven't been there maybe 15 years. And I wanted to know what has gone on, how it has developed, since I was there. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time, but I'd like to thank Lauren Haynes, the head curator and vice president of arts and culture at Governor's Island, for joining me today. To learn about our upcoming shows, you can follow us on Instagram at 1-to-1 CUNY TV. And you can watch the show on the go by downloading the CUNY TV app. For 1-to-1 and CUNY TV, I'm Sheryl McCarthy.